Welcome to Politics for Patriots. Here's your host, the eviscerator of progressive nonsense, the executioner of imbecility, and the grim reaper of BS, Eddie Zipper.
All right, welcome to the show. And first off, I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you all for making the last episode, episode 18, the most downloaded episode ever. All right, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the show today, and the first thing I want to do is go to some live audio of Mueller's search for Trump-Russia collusion. Let's check in and see how that search is coming.
Found anything yet? Nothing yet, sir. How about you? Not a thing, sir. What about you guys? We ain't found shit.
Oh, wait, my bad. That was Spaceballs. But I think that's about the same as what we would get if we dropped in on the Mueller investigation as they search for Trump-Russia collusion that does not exist. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Mueller investigation later, but first up, the impeachment talk is back. All right, there hasn't been, I would say the impeachment talk has begun, but there hasn't been a single minute of Trump's presidency when Democrats and never-Trump Whigs didn't want to impeach Trump. I call them Whigs because that was the political party that rose up against Andrew Jackson. Right, in 1824, Jackson ran as a Democratic Republican. That was the only national party. Okay, there were 4 candidates in that election, and they were all Democratic Republicans. It was the era of good feelings. So in 1828, Andrew Jackson ran as a Democrat. That was the first time anybody had ever run as a Democrat. Brand new national party. So the other side coalesced into a short-lived anti-Jackson Whig party. Essentially, the Whig party was just a bunch of different parties that came together as an anti-Jackson, right? The Never Jacksoners. They didn't actually agree on all that much. So there's huge variation from Whig to Whig in what their actual beliefs were. But what brought them together as one party was being anti-Andrew Jackson. All right, so both elected Whig presidents died early on in their terms. Famously, William Henry Harrison delivered the longest inauguration speech ever in the cold and rain. He got pneumonia and died a month into his term. Then, a couple of presidents later, Zachary Taylor died in office after eating iced milk and cherries, which, depending on who you listen to, either exposed him to bacteria or caused gastroenteritis. President Lincoln started out as a Whig, but by the time he became president, he was a Republican, of course. After the Federalists, the Whigs were like the next party of the elite, right? The Federalists were the party of the elite. The Democratic Republicans were the party of the people. And then when those parties died away, it became the Whigs who were the party of the elite. So those never-Trump Republicans who suffer from the most egregious cases of Trump derangement syndrome, and I'm not talking about the ones who maintain their conservative values and they just don't like Trump. And when Trump has good policies, they say okay. And then when they don't like his policies, they get upset. I'm talking about the ones who are essentially liberals now because protecting the status quo swamp is more important than ideology. So I call them the Whigs now. But that was a huge tangent. So, like I said at the top of the show, the impeachment talk is back. It began the moment President Trump won the election, of course. I want to talk a little bit about where this impeachment furor comes from. All right, it is total madness. And where the heck is this coming from? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit today about where it's coming from. It stems from a deep grief that I am going to explain to you now. Okay, so let's go back in time to the 2016 election. The media bombarded everyone so much with promises that Hillary Clinton would win the 2016 election that after she lost, those people were left feeling entitled to a Hillary Clinton presidency. They were entitled to it. It was promised to them and then taken away. Right? Nate Silver's 538 gave Hillary Clinton a 71.4% chance of winning. And that was one of the predictions that had the election the closest. The upshot at the New York Times had Hillary Clinton's chances at 85%. Predict-wise had Hillary Clinton's chances at 89%. Huffington Post, big surprise here, had Hillary's chances at 98%. The Princeton Election Consortium had Hillary's chances of winning the election at 99%. And Sabato's crystal ball had Hillary winning 322 electoral votes. So, the media, essentially all these data people, were promising, essentially, that Hillary Clinton was definitely going to win the election. All right? And it's not just these, lots of Republicans were positive too. A GOP insider at Politico said that for Trump to win, it would take video evidence of a smiling Hillary drowning a litter of puppies while terrorists surrounded her with chants of death to America. So the reaction when Donald Trump won the presidency, the reaction was, but you promised. You promised us that Hillary Clinton would win. You promised. And the aftermath, for those who wanted Hillary Clinton to win, who were promised by the media that Hillary would win, they seem to be going through the stages of grief, right? What's the first one? Denial. We saw the denial. They called for recounts. They claimed electors would not vote for Trump. Lawrence Lessig, who was this Harvard professor, said at least 20 Republican members of the Electoral College might not cast their votes for Donald Trump. Everybody on the left was saying at the time, oh, the electors aren't going to vote for Trump to be president. One headline read, "Faithless electors. What will happen if more decide not to vote for Trump?" So it was this big, and there were other pieces of denial, right? The Electoral College somehow suddenly doesn't matter and doesn't count. All these different pieces of denial. Anger. I think we've all seen the anger. I don't feel the need to cite specific examples of the anger. But off the top of my head, how about Scream at the Sky Day? Remember that? I think that was in Boston. I might be wrong. I think it was in Boston. And all the anti-Trumpers organized an event where they got together and screamed at the sky. Okay? That is anger. One of the stages of grief. All right, so what is all this stages of grief stuff coming to? All the impeachment talk that we have been hearing from the beginning till now, all that impeachment talk is bargaining. All right, Trump is the president, but we can get rid of him. We just have to wait for him to do something. We have to find some way that we can get rid of him, that the House of Representatives can impeach him. All right, so the impeachment talk started almost right away. And historically, here's the easiest way to impeach a president. All right, this is how Andrew Johnson got impeached. You pass a law you think the president will break, and then you impeach him for breaking that law. That is the simplest way to get a president impeached. All right, so Andrew Johnson was the first, of course, of two presidents who have been impeached, and everyone knows he was impeached, but not that many people know why Andrew Johnson was impeached. What was he impeached for? What did he do? All right, so fire up your flux capacitor. We're going back in time to the Abraham Lincoln presidency. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, but his vice president, Andrew Johnson, was a Democrat. The point of this is that it was supposed to show the unity of the parties standing up for the Union, right? We're going to put party politics aside because we have to preserve the Union. So Republican Abraham Lincoln teamed up with Democrat Andrew Johnson. All right, so of course, Lincoln gets shot and a Democrat becomes president. But there are huge Republican majorities in Congress. All right, the cabinet is full of Republicans. So Andrew Johnson becomes president, and the Republicans, especially the radical Republicans, don't like what he's up to on the issue of reconstructing the South, right? Because he wants to go soft on the South because he's a Democrat. So in 1967, the Republican Congress passes the Tenure of Office Act. Basically, this is a law that the President of the United States cannot fire cabinet members without Senate approval. And Johnson vetoed it, of course, because it is a law specifically designed just to stop Andrew Johnson from being able to fire all those people that Lincoln appointed and the Senate confirmed. So Johnson vetoed it, but the Republicans overrode the veto with 2/3 in both houses. So Johnson tried to replace Secretary of War, and now it's called the Secretary of Defense, but back then it was called the Secretary of War. It was a guy named Edwin Stanton, and Johnson decided to replace him with Ulysses S. Grant. And so Johnson ended up violating the Tenure of Office Act, which he did not believe was a constitutional law anyway, and I'm going to get to this in a second, but it was not a constitutional law because the legislative branch cannot legislate themselves any executive power. So if you look at the 11 articles of impeachment against Andrew Johnson, they're all the same thing over and over, which is that, they're redundant. There's just the one, there's 11 articles of impeachment, but there's just the one reason, really. And that is breaking the Tenure of Office Act by getting rid of Edwin Stanton. All right. So later, way later, when William Howard Taft is Chief Justice of the United States, because he was Chief Justice later after he was president, the Supreme Court declares the Tenure of Office Act unconstitutional in a case called Myers versus the United States. Even though Congress basically repealed most of that act before Grant became president, right? Because it wasn't a law that was meant to stop Grant from exercising any powers. It was only meant to stop Johnson from exercising his executive powers. So, now jump ahead many, many years to December of 2016. Democrats start trying to pave the way to impeach Trump using the same method that Republicans used against Andrew Johnson. Vanity Fair, which hates Donald Trump, all their opinion is wildly leftist. Vanity Fair, in an article entitled "Democrats Pave the Way to Impeach Trump," describes the process. And Trump's not even president yet. This is in December of 2016. I'm going to read to you from this Vanity Fair article. On Thursday, 5 Democratic senators announced a bill they plan to release next month that would require Trump to divest assets that could pose a conflict of interest, according to Politico. The bill, put forward by Elizabeth Warren, Dick Durbin, Chris Coons, Ben Cardin, and Jeff Merkley, would require the president-elect to put the proceeds of the sale in a blind trust. The legislation would symbolically make violations of federal conflict of interest rules a high crime and misdemeanor under the impeachment clause of the U.S. Constitution. Okay. And why do you think Democrats are constantly pushing for Congress to pass a bill to make it illegal for President Trump to fire Robert Mueller? Because then they can impeach Trump for firing Mueller because it's against the law. All right, that bill would be unconstitutional, of course, according to the Supreme Court interpretation of the Constitution in Myers versus the United States. So, that is an attempt to use the same method used against Johnson. The difference being that Democrats don't have huge supermajorities in Congress. Why do you think Democrats are always pushing for that bill? The bill to make it illegal for Trump to fire Mueller, because then if he fires Mueller, they can impeach him. It's much more difficult to impeach him for exercising his executive power if you haven't legislated that executive power away from him. And there have been calls and attempts to impeach Trump almost every single month that he's been president. And now, thanks to what happened in Helsinki, we have renewed calls, renewed fervor to get rid of Trump. So President Trump made a gaffe in Helsinki when he responded to the question about Russian interference, and he knows that. That's why he came out yesterday and corrected his statements. So Trump has, many, many times before, said that Russia did interfere in our election. Okay, this is not the first time he's made this gaffe. He's made this same gaffe before. 9 days before President Trump's inauguration, the New York Times ran a headline, Donald Trump concedes Russia's interference in election. All right, Newsweek, June 24th, 2017, headline, Trump admits to Russia meddling in elections, says Obama administration knew but did nothing. Time magazine, July 6, 2017, President Trump says nobody really knows if only Russia interfered in U.S. election. USA Today, November 2017, Trump says he believes intelligence assessment that Russia interfered in election, but Putin does not. Express UK, November 2017, Donald Trump now says Russia did meddle in U.S. election in a bizarre security agency U-turn. All right, and there are tons more of these. I didn't read them all because a lot of them are redundant. They're covering the same story, but those are all covering different instances. You can tell by the dates. Except the last one, I did two from November, but other than that. So there are tons more of these, and this keeps happening over and over, but in the end, Trump keeps saying, I'm with our agencies. All right, so he's now clarified the statement. Interesting, considering the mainstream media was pushing the talking point that Trump must have made the statement because Putin has all this secret dirt on him, right? Putin is blackmailing him, so he had to say that. I suppose now that Trump has backtracked, Putin is going to release all that secret dirt, right? So if that's why Trump did it, which was a big talking point, then the repercussions must be on their way, right? And we should all be surprised if Putin doesn't release all this dirt on Trump. All right, so anyway, former CIA director, the guy who was on watch when the Russians did their election meddling, tweeted, Donald Trump's press conference in Helsinki rises to the threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors. And he says high crimes and misdemeanors because he's citing the impeachment clause of the Constitution. It was nothing short of treasonous. Not only were Trump's comments imbecilic, he is wholly in the pocket of Putin. All right, side note, in 1976, John Brennan voted for Gus Hall for president. Gus Hall was the nominee of the Soviet-controlled American Communist Party, and that was during the Cold War. So I don't think Brennan has a ton of ethos on the issue of who's controlled by Russia. Anyway, Washington Post writer. No, I want to do USA Today first, but I got to pull that up on my phone. Here's what the USA Today writer said. Okay, and these are all people who are saying, oh, we got to impeach Trump because this was treason and whatever else. All right, so the USA Today writer says, the irony is if the Mueller probe had been terminated, as many Republicans have demanded, we would not know the full extent and scope of Russia's efforts to undermine our elections. If Republicans are sincere in their statements about Trump's treasonous performance in Helsinki on Monday, they need to do more than just issue statements. All right? How much more harm, and I'm skipping ahead, how much more harm needs to come to the United States of America before Republicans in Congress impeach Donald Trump? All right, so other stuff in the media, New York Daily News, on their cover, it says open treason, and it has a picture of Donald Trump holding hands with Putin and shooting Uncle Sam in the head. The Guardian, nothing short of treasonous, Trump accused over Putin talks. Okay, so this is a huge meltdown. And now I'm going to talk about what was in the Washington Post. The Washington Post writer wrote an opinion piece called "Donald Trump Didn't Commit Treason in Helsinki, but His Actions Are Impeachable Anyway." Great. Really smart work there. All actions are impeachable, in theory, because impeachment is a political process. It is not a legal process. The president can be impeached for anything that 218 representatives are willing to impeach him for. So, are 218 representatives going to be willing to impeach Trump for what is a gaffe? No. That's why the WAPO article devolves into outrageous conjecture, right? Speculation on tons of things that Trump might have done. Okay, so this impeachment that this writer is calling for is based almost entirely on things that the writer speculates about with no evidence. Perhaps the Russian intelligence services have compromising information. If not the P-tape, then evidence of criminal activity at Trump's businesses or in the 2016 campaign. And there's that talking point I mentioned earlier. Trump backtracked, so I suppose we can expect Putin to release all those things that he has on Trump now. Perhaps he is simply dependent on Russian money for his personal finances. In any event, the fact that Trump is seemingly incapable of criticizing or responding to Russian aggression indicates that Russia has some sort of hold on Trump. Overall, the evidence suggests that Trump has betrayed his trust and justifies an immediate impeachment investigation. Trump's betrayal may not meet the technical definition of treason, but it certainly carries the stench of treachery, and that is grounds for impeachment. So basically, this Washington Post writer wants to impeach Trump for things that he conjectured, things that he just made up. Like, he doesn't have any evidence to back up any of those claims. He made up motivations for Trump to say what he said in Helsinki. He made up motivations, and now at the end of the article, he wants to impeach President Trump for the motivations that he made up. All right, so I don't think stench of treachery based on the conjecture of a partisan Washington Post writer is going to make a particularly strong article of impeachment. I don't think you're going to get 218 members of the House of Representatives on board for that one. But that is desperate bargaining. It is desperate bargaining. Remember the stages of grief. We're talking about bargaining here. He leaves out one of the possible motivations. He leaves out the possibility that Trump is just engaging in diplomacy, right? This sort of flattery has been noted before in Trump's meeting with China's Xi and North Korea's Kim, and it's actually shown some results in those relationships. So is it crazy to think that, I don't know, a U.S. president might not think shaming Putin publicly is worth the deterioration of our relationship with Putin? Is that crazy? I don't know. Let's ask President Obama. Everybody seems to like him. Let's ask President Obama what he thinks.
And I know that there have been folks out there who suggest somehow that if we went out there and made big announcements and thumped our chests about a bunch of stuff, that somehow that would potentially spook the Russians. But keep in mind that we already have enormous numbers of sanctions against the Russians. The relationship between us and Russia has deteriorated, sadly, significantly over the last several years. And so how we approach an appropriate response that increases costs for them for behavior like this in the future, but does not create problems for us, is something that's worth taking the time to think through and figure out. And that's exactly what we've done. So at a point in time where we've taken certain actions that we can divulge publicly, we will do so. there are times where the message will be directly received by the Russians and not publicized. And I should point out, by the way, part of why the Russians have been effective on this is because they don't go around announcing what they're doing. It's not like Putin's going around the world publicly saying, look what we did, wasn't that clever? He denies it. So the idea that somehow public shaming is going to be effective, I think doesn't read the thought process in Russia very well.
So what Trump said is a gaffe. That's it. That's all it is. It's being called treasonous and treacherous and a violation of the oath of office and a betrayal of America because, have we not seen by this point that the mainstream media is grasping to anything that they can to try to take down President Trump? Like, they don't care what it is. I promise you, if President Obama went and said the exact same thing, all the Republicans who are mad at Trump right now would be mad at Obama too. But the leftists and the mainstream media who are mad at Trump, they would not care at all. They would be defending him. So the hyperbole, and I'm not saying it's not a mistake, I'm saying that the hyperbole being used about it by the McPundits, that's what I call, people who can't make a real argument, so they just go around saying the most outrageous thing that they can. They're McPundits. They're McPundits. They serve up hyperbole burgers, which are low quality and unhealthy, but fast and effective. Okay, so the people comparing Trump's gaffe in Helsinki to like Pearl Harbor or, Nazi Germany, that's insane. It's a desperate, pathetic attempt to make it more than it actually is. You see, and when they do this, they're diminishing their own argument. Like, oh, they actually got something that isn't made up. But they reach so far that they just wind up sounding insane. No, you're not going to impeach Trump. No, the House of Representatives is not going to impeach Trump for this. The Senate is not going to remove him from office. No, it's not Pearl Harbor. No, it's not Nazi Germany. No, it's not treason. No, it's not treachery. It's a gaffe. The impeachment talk is insane overreach. I mean, we're not that far removed from the Obama administration sending a plane full of cash to a country that funds terrorist groups. Right? Politico headline. State Department, and this is an old one. But it's from Politico. It's not from the Daily Caller or any sort of conservative media. It's from Politico. State Department confirms $400 million Iran payment conditioned on prisoner release. No hysteria on CNN. No outrage. No calls for impeachment. No former CIA directors claiming Obama is the Ayatollah's puppet. No allegations of treason or treachery or stenches of anything. Right? And that was an action. Trump's words may not have been tough enough on Putin at the Helsinki conference, but they were off-the-cuff words. Right? His actions on Russia have been much tougher than Obama's. I mean, Trump is the one who backed up the red line that Obama drew in the sand and then backed away from. All right, much of the reason Democrats are so eager to impeach Trump is because the great Trump-Russia collusion gambit has blown up in their faces. That was how they were going to get rid of Trump. The Mueller investigation was supposed to lead to an impeachment. And how did that investigation get started? Former CIA Director James Comey leaking to the press because he wanted to get Mueller appointed, or he wanted to get a special counsel appointed. All right, this is James Comey. This is the same guy who decided to hold a press conference announcing no indictment for Hillary Clinton. The same guy who just tweeted that we need to elect Democrats in the midterms. The same guy who let Peter Strzok run amok on a mission to stop Donald Trump. Wait for the Trump-Russia IG report to come out. I think the bias in that case is going to be a lot harder to hide than the Hillary email case bias, which we all saw was bias. We saw Peter Strzok's texts. We know that's probably why the DOJ and FBI keep stonewalling congressional oversight. I predict that the next IG report is going to be a lot bigger than the last IG report. And you know how I know there's no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion? 2 reasons. Number one, no indictments based on Trump-Russia collusion. 0. None of the indictments that come down have been based on Trump-Russia collusion. None of them. Reason number 2, if Mueller had any evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, it would leak right away, lickety-split all over the media. Every time they've thought they had evidence, it has been leaked, right? The Deutsche Bank, the WikiLeaks key codes sent to Donald Trump Jr. before the emails released. After the emails were released. Scaramucci and the Russians retracted. Trump told Flynn to talk to the Russians before the election. Oops, it was after the election. All those stories leaked. They were all fake, but they leaked. That tells me that any piece of evidence Mueller comes up with on Trump-Russia collusion will immediately leak to the media, and we will all know about it. We've seen that happen already. But there is no collusion. There was Russian meddling, but that happened on Obama's watch, Brennan's watch, Comey's watch, Clapper's watch. If it happens again, it'll be on Trump's watch this time, and then he'll have to answer for that. So the newest round of impeachment talk is simply more bargaining from grief-stricken Democrats. Trump will not be impeached. I don't know, maybe after the midterms, maybe Democrats win a bunch of House seats, and then Trump probably will be impeached. They'll impeach him if they win the House, or if they win by enough in the House to get President Trump impeached. That doesn't mean that the impeachment will be legitimate, right? Impeachment's a political process, not a legal one. But even if that happens, President Trump won't be removed from office by 2/3 of the Senate without evidence of lawbreaking. So people sometimes conflate impeachment with being removed from office, but they're not the same thing. It's a totally different process. Right? Only the House of Representatives can impeach you. That requires the simple majority of 50% plus 1 of the representatives on an article of impeachment or more articles of impeachment. If that happens, then you are impeached. What happens if you are impeached? You're not removed from office automatically. You go to the Senate, and there's a trial held in the Senate. The Chief Justice of the United States presides over that trial. And at the end of the trial, 2/3 of the Senate, that's 67 senators, have to agree to remove you from office. So, presumably, if President Trump gets impeached by Democrats after the midterms because Democrats win a bunch of House seats, then he'll stand trial in the Senate. And if there's no real lawbreaking, if there's no evidence of lawbreaking, if all they have is some stuff that an opinion writer made up in the Washington Post, motivations that are completely conjecture and speculation, then President Trump will not be removed from office by the Senate, and all it'll do is waste taxpayer dollars, waste all our time, bog down our government in nonsense, which is probably the point to begin with. It's a good process because, and the founders set it up good, because no Senate is going to remove the president from office without evidence of lawbreaking or wrongdoing, without evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors. The threshold is so high that it's just not going to happen. Andrew Johnson, right? I told you at the beginning of the episode how they passed the Tenure of Office Act and then impeached Johnson for breaking that. Well, you know what? He wasn't removed from office. He was saved by 1 vote in the Senate. So I think the Senate takes the job seriously. I think it's a really tough threshold to get 2/3. So nobody's being removed from office unless they have really genuinely broken a law and evidence can be produced that they broke that law. in the meantime, try not to let the McPundits get to you. They'll keep talking treason, treachery, breaking the oath of office. They'll keep talking about impeachment. But all that is more a reflection of the grief that they're going through and the trauma that it has caused them than it is a reflection on how President Trump is actually doing as President of the United States. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Go to my website, www.eddiezipper.com. You can subscribe to my email list. I'll email every show to you. Please subscribe on iTunes if you have a chance. Leave a review on iTunes. All of that would be much appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. That's it. I'm out of here.
You just listened to Politics for Patriots with Eddie Zipper. Email the show at patriots@eddiezipper.com and please subscribe.